Although the problem of dandruff is probably one that has affected mankind almost since the dawn of time, it is nevertheless a problem that is not completely and fully understood as yet. Hence it is difficult if not impossible to give a complete definition of what causes dandruff. On the other hand, there are many factors that appear to be implicated in causing the condition, some of which are internal, others that are directly related to the scalp itself. Firstly, there are suggestions that part of the reason that some people suffer dandruff could be genetic. Part of the reason for believing this is that dandruff generally starts to appear after puberty, and is also far more common in men than it is in women. It is also another oddity about dandruff that it appears to be more common in people who suffer from certain diseases, such as Parkinson's disease, which researchers suggest might also have some genetic causes as well. Does dry skin cause dandruff? It is a very common belief that dry skin and dandruff go together, but in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. As suggested in the previous chapter, without sebum, the Malassezia yeast has nothing to feed on, and therefore the whole chain of dandruff production is irrevocably broken without oily skin. Dandruff is a result of poor hygiene. It is unlikely that poor hygiene has anything to do with causing dandruff, despite the fact that the probable main cause of the condition is yeast on the skin, which feeds on the oil secreted by the sebaceous glands. However, it appears that people who suffer dandruff do not necessarily have more yeast on their skin, although they may at certain times of their life, i.e. around puberty, produce more natural oil. In fact, rather than having more yeast on their skin, it is likely that people who suffer dandruff simply more sensitive to the yeast. Sunlight and headgear. It is probably true that exposing your head to the sunlight may inhibit the growth of Malassezia yeast, which like all other yeasts thrives in darker, damp conditions. Think about the kind of places where you would expect fungi, yeast as a fungus, like mushrooms, to grow, and you will quickly have a fairly accurate picture of the kind of conditions in which Malassezia yeast is happiest. And I have no doubt that the picture in your mind is not one of mushrooms shooting up in bright, warm sunlight. It is for this reason that many people suspect, perhaps correctly, that wearing a hat or a bonnet might create an ideal environment for dandruff to develop, because enclosing your head in this way could create an environment that is far more like that which Malassezia yeast will thrive in. For this reason, if you are a dandruff sufferer, one of the first things that you can do is to expose your head to the sunlight as often as you possibly can. In the same vein, you should avoid wearing headgear whenever possible as well. Many sufferers find that their dandruff is seasonal, being considerably worse in the cold and damp of the fall, autumn, and winter than it is in spring and summer. Of course, if you live in a place where sunlight is generally at a premium, there is perhaps not a great deal you can do, but you should nevertheless be aware that exposing your head to the sun is one way of naturally combating dandruff. You can contract dandruff from a dirty hairbrush. Although it may not be particularly pleasant to use someone else's hairbrush or comb if they are dandruff sufferer, it is not true that you can develop dandruff yourself from doing so. Unlike head lice, as an example, dandruff cannot be passed from one person to another in any way, as it is entirely non-contagious, so sharing a brush or borrowing someone else's hat is not going to increase the possibility of you developing a dandruff problem. Stress and diet. There is evidence that stress can play a part in causing dandruff or in making a pre-existing dandruff problem worse. Why this should be the case is not particularly clear, although it may be that your body speeds up the skin cell production process at times of stress and anxiety when it is more excited. There may also be a connection with the fact that stress and anxiety might prompt quicker sebum production, as it is natural to sweat more at times when anxiety or stress is greater. In a similar manner, if your diet contains too much sugar, fat, or starch, this could exacerbate your dandruff problem, as can a diet that is generally low in healthy nutrition. It is sometimes suggested that a dandruff sufferer should avoid eating hot, spicy food, which causes sweating in many people, and that alcohol should also be avoided, as it is believed that the toxic nature of alcohol in the body might aggravate the problem. Non-natural dandruff treatments analyzed. Perhaps not surprisingly, the number one objective of anyone who suffers from dandruff will almost inevitably be to do whatever is necessary to bring their condition under control. In fact, in my own experience of family members who have suffered from dandruff, they have tried almost every possible solution they have come across for the condition, including quite a few that, in truth, sounded extremely unlikely to work, if not a bit crazy. Amongst the solutions that I would guess almost every dandruff sufferer has tried or will try are medicated shampoos which include chemicals which are supposed to control dandruff. There are many different dandruff control shampoos on the market, many of which can be bought over the counter in pharmacies or from drug stores. The active ingredients of these shampoos not surprisingly varies from one brand to another, with some being based on relatively natural substances whilst others are chemical-based. Before considering how you can treat your dandruff problem entirely naturally, it makes sense to consider these chemical-based shampoos in order to establish whether there are any possible adverse side effects. In the majority of cases, the idea of including chemicals in an anti-dandruff shampoo is that the chemicals used are antimicrobial or antifungal so that they reduce or prevent dandruff by inhibiting the growth of the necessary yeast that is a root cause of dandruff. There are several different chemicals used in the different brands, with the most common being selenium sulfide, pyrithione zinc and ketoconazole. For the majority of people, because these chemicals are contained in relatively small amounts in medicated shampoos, the risk of adverse side effects is fairly limited. However, this does not mean that there is no risk in using the shampoos, because every individual is different and therefore the susceptibility to unpleasant side effects of any individual person using such as shampoo is an unknown. However, even if you're not a person who suffers from overly sensitive skin, it still makes a great deal of sense to try natural solutions for your dandruff problem before turning to chemical-based shampoos, creams or potions. Subscribe.